are coming on the air with President Trump's battles on multiple fronts in Iran and at the Vatican, with the president trying to cut off Iranian ships near the Strait of Hormuz, even if it means higher prices at home. Day one of his blockade and the red lines of this ceasefire that's barely hanging on. We're live in the region with the latest. Plus, we're live at the White House with the battle lines between arguably the two most powerful people on the planet. Why Pope Leo says he's not afraid of the Trump administration, and how the president's explaining that AI picture that seems to show him as Jesus.
I did post it, and I thought it was me as a doctor.
But the president apparently pulled down that post anyway. Then the deadline just hours from now for police in the Bahamas to either charge or not a man whose wife went missing after going overboard. What our team is hearing from his attorney. And why the stepbrother of a teen girl found dead on a cruise last year is now accused of her murder. What we're finding out about the charges against him tonight. Then the new demand for the Pentagon to hand over alleged videos of what could be alien ships ASAP. The congresswoman behind that call, one-on-one with our team in the breakdown. That's coming up a little bit later in the show. Hey, I'm Hallie, and right now that ceasefire with Iran seems to be hanging on by a thread about 6 hours into President Trump's push to try and blockade Iranian ports at that critical Strait of Hormuz. Max economic pressure, right? That's the goal. That's the goal, to try to get Iran to back down, even if that raises prices here in the U.S. So what does Wall Street think about it? Well, look, they seem to like it. Look at that middle number, the S&P, erasing all of its losses during this war. In other words, that index is back up to where it was before the bombs started dropping, as the president's laying out his red lines for where these talks, he thinks, should go next.
Iran will not have a nuclear weapon. And we agreed to a lot of things, but they didn't agree to that. And I think they will agree to it. I'm almost sure of it. In fact, I am sure of it. If they don't agree, there's no deal. There'll never be a deal.
So some pretty serious stuff from the president there, delivered rather incongruously at an appearance outside the Oval Office. You see it here, greeting if you read her shirt, a DoorDash grandma handing off a McDonald's delivery, with the president asking for her thoughts on trans people in sports. At one point, pulling out cash to tip her. At another point, referencing this AI-generated and now deleted post that seems to show the president as Christ healing a sick person.
I did post it, and I thought it was me as a doctor, and had to do with Red Cross, as a Red Cross worker there, which we support.
So question is the "I'm not Jesus, I'm a doctor" defense going to resonate with the Christians who called the picture frankly disgusting, among other things, in a wave of backlash today? We've got it all covered. Julie Sirkin has more on that in a minute. Ali Canal is joining us for a check on the markets. But I want to start in the region, in the Middle East. Richard Engel is in Tel Aviv for us. And Richard, let's talk about where this goes with this blockade, this ceasefire hanging on. A U.S. official tells NBC News that there is what they call forward motion between Iran and the U.S. on some kind of an agreement. Give us the reality check on this, and then how the Iranians are responding to the blockade.
Well, there's a protest in Iran tonight with thousands of people on the streets. This is a pro-government rally, pro-government-sponsored event. Iranians aren't free at the moment, or haven't been free for a long time, to go out on the streets and assemble in any political way. But there is a movement on the streets, people saying that this is outrageous, that this blockade should never have been imposed. Iran officially calls it piracy. Iran has responded with a series of threats. The IRGC, according to Iranian state media, saying that unless Iranian ports are safe, then ports in the Gulf won't be safe. That unless the Hormuz is safe for everyone, it will be safe for no one. And the chief negotiator said that Americans, if this continues, will be nostalgic for $4 and $5 gas prices. So Iran is reacting quite strongly. And a lot of it goes down to credibility. You played that clip a short moment ago, that post that President Trump put out showing him apparently as Jesus. As strange as that might sound, that and many other things that President Trump has said and posted are related to all of this. The Iranians simply don't trust this administration. They don't trust President Trump. They don't believe what he says. They don't believe that he's entering into good faith negotiations. I've spoken to Iranian officials directly, and they've told me this. They just don't have confidence in what President Trump says. They've entered into negotiation with him on several times. They've been attacked in the middle of negotiations. So there is not a lot of faith on the Iranian side to sign a deal right now when there are warships just off of the Iranian coast and thousands of American troops, and President Trump talks about annihilating their civilization. They're not right now clamoring for a deal, as far as I can tell, as President Trump claims, because of the credibility gap. They just don't believe that he's going to follow through on it.
Richard Engel, live for us there in Tel Aviv. Richard, we're glad to have you there in the region. Thank you. Let me bring in Hallie Canal now. And Hallie, what's interesting here, we talked about the S&P erasing the losses from the Iran war. It's this sense, and I know you've been reporting this out, that maybe any news seems to be good news for the markets.
Yeah, or at least the worst case scenario didn't materialize. So that's good enough for markets. You were just mentioning those gains across the board here. The S&P 500 is now positive for the year. We also saw the Dow and the tech-heavy NASDAQ composite close higher as well. Now, my Wall Street sources, they tell me that it's from a few different things. So I mentioned the fact that we didn't see that worst case scenario. For investors, that was attacks on Iran's energy infrastructure. Remember, it wasn't too long ago that President Trump was threatening to eliminate an entire civilization. So while this partial blockade, yes, it will cause disruptions, it's not the worst case that was on the table. Number two, we've seen this playbook before. When you look at other geopolitical shocks, whether it be the COVID-19 pandemic, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, markets often sell off hard at first, but then they tend to stabilize and maybe even rebound before that uncertainty is fully resolved. And that really comes down to how markets are wired. They're not just trading what's going on right now. They're also constantly repricing what they think will happen in the future. And investors seem to think that what's going on in Iran, it's a short-term shock. And then finally, earnings. They continue to be strong. The expectations continue to be high. We're just kicking off earnings season. If there's any indication that companies are struggling, again, investors could reprice some of that risk. But earnings really is what powers the stock market right now. So as long as that remains intact and as long as that worst case scenario, we don't hit that, I do expect markets will keep being resilient here.
Okay, Hallie Canal, thank you very much. We're talking about markets. We're talking about this Iranian blockade. If you're like, Hallie, get to the Pope. What is the deal with the president v. the Pope? Well, we laid it out, right? He's pulling down that AI-generated picture of him as either a doctor or Jesus. The president says doctor. But he's not distancing himself from this 334-word attack against Pope Leo. You see it here. Calling Leo, the first American, of course, to lead the Catholic Church, weak on crime. Weak on nukes, given the Pope's anti-war statement. So our Claudio Levanga, you know Claudio, he's our Vatican Rome reporter. He asked the Pope about this, and the Pope said, hey, President Trump doesn't scare me. Listen.
I have no fear of neither the Trump administration nor speaking out loudly about the message of the gospel. And that's what I believe I am called to do, what the church is called to do. We're not politicians. We're not looking to make foreign policy, as he calls it, with the same perspective that he might understand it. But I do believe that the message of the gospel, blessed are the peacemakers, is the message that the world needs to hear today.
Let me bring in Julie Sirkin at the White House, and let me ask you a question that may perhaps be rhetorical, may perhaps be, at least at the moment, unknowable. But why did the president decide that now is the time to pick a fight with the Pope?
Well, I think one of the reasons is maybe that 60 Minutes segment that we saw on CBS Sunday night, where American cardinals essentially said or criticized the president administration for the war in Iran, for his immigration policies. And of course, we've seen over and over again Pope Leo use his position to talk about peacemaking, to talk about building bridges, saying that this war is immoral. Now, the president had an opportunity today to apologize for the post about Pope Leo. You mentioned that AI photo that the White House or whoever deleted from the president's Truth Social account. Some may say that is a form of the president's apology, but on Pope Leo, not so. Take a listen.
Will you apologize?
No, I don't, because Pope Leo said things that are wrong. He was very much against what I'm doing with regard to Iran, and you cannot have a nuclear Iran. Pope Leo would not be happy with the end result.
Now, the president also posted on Truth Social, Hallie, earlier, essentially saying that the only reason Pope Leo was chosen by the church is because he's an American and they feel like he would have a better chance of standing up to the president. He also called the Pope a liberal. But when you look at the polling, he has widespread support among Democrats, among Republicans, among independent voters. And I think those numbers are interesting and notable, especially when you compare them among the president's own approval ratings. Hallie?
There's also, this is pretty day one stuff, I think, for Catholics, right? I mean, Senate Majority Leader John Thune told our team, I wouldn't go after the church. of the 10 commandments, the first 2 are like about not remaking yourself in the image of God. Is there any concern about long-term political risk here? Or, Julie, from the man who once famously joked he could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and not lose any supporters, is there also a sense that he could post a picture of himself, arguably portrayed as Jesus Christ, and not lose any evangelicals?
I think it's a little bit of both, and I would point out that John Thune is himself an evangelical, so those words are extremely interesting from him. Tom Tillis as well, speaking to our team. He's a Catholic, saying it's not really a good idea to pick a fight with the Pope, especially as a political leader. Other supporters I noticed sharing pictures of Ronald Reagan and the Pope at that time, so I thought that was interesting as well. These are supporters of the president I'm talking about, but there was some backlash to the post, not about Pope Leo, but about that AI-generated image, maybe because of those commandments that you just referenced. We saw a post, for example, from Riley Gaines, who is a very big Trump ally. She's a conservative activist. She helped him with many policies concerning transgender athletes in school sports, others, podcasters, conservative leaders, church leaders. We also know that he heard backlash from maybe some of the conservative Catholic leaders that are a part of his religious committee as well. And so all of this combined, I think, eventually led the White House or somebody close to the president to pull the post from Truth Social. We asked the White House for more specifics. They did not respond. Hallie?
Julie Sirkin live for us there on the North Lawn. Jules, thank you very much. More on that as we get it. Also tonight in the West, a woman who's accusing a California congressman of sexual misconduct says she will share her story publicly tomorrow. That's after the House Ethics Committee has just opened an investigation into Congressman Eric Swalwell, you see him here, over multiple sex assault allegations against him. Swalwell had been running as a Democrat for California's governor. After days of pressure, he has now dropped out. He wrote on social media online, "I am deeply sorry for mistakes and judgment I've made in my past." This is his post suspending his campaign. He says, "I will fight these serious false allegations that have been made, but that's my fight, not a campaign's." A former staffer told the San Francisco Chronicle Swalwell sexually assaulted her twice while she was too intoxicated to consent. NBC News has not verified her allegations, but confirmed her identity and that she worked for Swalwell from 2019 until 2021. CNN also reports 4 women have made sexual misconduct allegations against Swalwell, including one whose story matched details from the Chronicle article. NBC News has not independently corroborated their stories. Ryan Nobles is covering this for us tonight, and Swalwell is denying what he's calling false allegations against him. He is acknowledging what he describes mistakes in judgment in his past. Help us understand that and what the Ethics Committee is going to be looking into here.
Well, it's hard to parse exactly what the congressman is talking about when he says that the allegations against him are false, but does admit to making mistakes, because he's not offering much clarity. He's not sat for an interview. He's not provided any explanation or given his side of the story as it relates to these very specific allegations that come with a degree of evidence to prove the point. And that's going to be the job of the Ethics Committee, right? They've launched an investigation starting today. It will likely mean that they will bring in some of these victims to tell their story, the possibility of them collecting evidence around these accusations to try and drive home the point. I think the open question here today, Hallie, is how far into this investigation does the Ethics Committee get before Eric Swalwell decides that it's just not worth it, and he takes on and takes to heart these calls from across the political spectrum saying that it's time to step down from Congress. That would immediately end this ethics investigation. It would potentially end further embarrassing information coming out from his perspective. It wouldn't stop potential criminal investigations down the road, but it would at least be one less thing for him to worry about. And so at this stage, I think a lot of this is in the control of the congressman himself, and we're not getting a real sense exactly where his head is in all of this as this ethics investigation now gets underway.
We've heard publicly from some in his own party, some Democrats who, while calling on him to be expelled, while calling on him to leave Congress, are also pointing across the aisle and saying, well, wait a second, what about Congressman Tony Gonzalez, a Republican? Ryan, I know you covered this extensively, dropped his own re-election campaign over sex misconduct allegations he faced. And there is a question of what about the spotlight on Gonzalez? Where does that stand?
So I think what this is doing is once again shining a spotlight on what many members of Congress and many staff believe are an ongoing problem of people in power that are using that power to try and contribute to their own sexual desires, and with it, taking victims as a result. And the situation with Tony Gonzalez is not exactly like the situation with Eric Swalwell, but he has been credibly accused of being involved in extramarital affairs. In fact, he has has admitted to having extramarital affairs with staffers. That is a direct violation of House rules. And so what I think you see both Republicans and Democrats saying is that both these guys should go. Both of them, there's enough here to lead us to believe that we do not want them to be a part of this body and this organization in which we are trying to write laws that would support the American people. And I don't think it necessarily stops with Tony Gonzalez and Eric Swalwell, Hallie. There are several other members of Congress who have accusations against them. There's certainly rumors about many other members of Congress that could be in a similar boat. So this could be the tip of the iceberg as this process plays itself forward. And you're starting to see an undercurrent of members of Congress who have said, I am done with this, and anyone involved in this needs to go.
Ryan Nobles, thank you very much for that. Much to watch. We are also watching what's happening in the Bahamas. We're up against now, just about 2 hours from now, this deadline for Bahamas police, 7:20 Eastern time, to either charge the husband of an American woman who went missing in the Bahamas or let him walk free. Now, according to Brian Hooker's attorney, even if police release him tonight, they could end up rearresting him right away. Right. So there's this big question mark as to how they are going to handle whatever's going to happen over the next 120 minutes. Police apparently interviewed Hooker again this morning. Now, his wife, Lynette, has been missing for more than a week now. Remember, her husband says she fell off a dinghy that the couple was riding in earlier this month and that he had to paddle back to a boatyard to call police because apparently she fell overboard with the key to the boat. He hasn't seen her since, he says. Now, Lynette Hooker's daughter has been skeptical of what her stepdad says happened. According to her, she says the couple had a history of not getting along when they drank, especially. Hooker says he's innocent. Jesse Kirsch is on the ground for us in the Bahamas. So here we are now. We are just about 2 hours from this deadline. She thinks that the attorney for Brian Hooker thinks that officials are leaning toward charging him. What do we know? Have we heard anything from police? And what do you think is going to happen? I mean, when will we know what has happened in the building behind you?
Yeah, so Hallie, we're keeping an eye on the clock here. We're basically right on the dot at 2 hours from now. That is the deadline we've been told by Brian Hooker's attorney. At that point, authorities will have to either have charged him or set him free. That is what we've been told by his lawyer. We have reached out repeatedly for days now to police, but have not been given a comment about this or any other new information that has come out in recent days. But we do know, according to Brian Hooker's attorney, that he was questioned once again by police earlier today. The interview lasting less than an hour, according to his lawyer, says authorities were basically asking him about the same topics that they were asking him about last week. No new evidence, no new specific lines of questioning, really just more of the same. And I asked his attorney if there are frustrations from him about how this just feels like it's going in a circle, it seems. Here's part of what she shared with me.
He is calm. There are times when he has his low moments. But when I went in today, he said he was encouraged to see me. And he was encouraged by the words, the messages from his family members encouraging him and sending their love.
And at this point, again, Hallie, we are waiting to see what happens in the next 2 hours, either Brian Hooker being charged with a crime or walking out of the doors right behind me. And his lawyer says even if he is released, he could then be rearrested potentially. Hallie.
Jesse Kirsch, much to watch, and you're going to stay live for us there in case of any developments. Come back, obviously, if there are any. We'll have you keep us posted. Thank you. Back here in the U.S., we're learning one county in Minnesota is now investigating the arrest of an American by federal officers there as a possible kidnapping. So this American was arrested, and now they're looking into it as maybe a kidnapping by the feds. This was all captured on video when it happened. This was back in January. So think about the dynamic back in January. This was like major sort of crackdown moment for the Trump administration on immigration, especially in Minnesota. Think about the protests there, et cetera. So you just saw officers bash open Chong-Lee Scott Tao's door at gunpoint without a warrant. No warrant here. They let him outside. He's in, you saw it. I mean, he was in his blanket, basically. It looks like a pair of shorts. It was very cold, January in Minnesota. Tao was released after a few hours. Once he says officers realized he was an American, he had no criminal record. Watch.
Suddenly there's a guns pointed at us. I thought, whoa. And then they goes, you come out here.
Well, now officials say they're looking at this, treating this like a case of potential kidnapping, burglary, false imprisonment. They want information from the Department of Homeland Security. We're out to DHS on this, and you can see the statement here that ICE does not kidnap people. They say this is nothing but a political stunt to demonize ICE, who are facing an increase in assaults against them. Let me get to Maggie Vespa, who's joining us on this. I think it is fair to call this an escalation now between the local officials and the feds in this state when it comes to this immigration crackdown.
Yeah, Hallie, for sure. We haven't seen anything like this. And for people at home sitting there thinking, well, what does this mean? Well, effectively, it means just what it sounds like, that basically this county attorney and county sheriff, and this is Ramsey County, where St. Paul is, want to charge those officers who you see in that video with any number of felonies, including but not limited to kidnapping, burglary, and unlawful detainment for that arrest that we all saw play out in that video. And keep in mind, you talk about the timing, that was less than 2 weeks after the fatal shooting of Renee Good. So tensions were really peaking in Minneapolis at that point. But here's the problem, say the county attorney and the sheriff. They don't know the names of those officers. They don't have, like, badge numbers for these guys or specifically what agencies they were working for. One of them had ERO on his vest, which is Emergency Removal Operations. That's a division of ICE. But they say the Trump administration is refusing to turn over that information, as well as they said, we believe there was no warrant, but if you thought there was or if you had one at the time, please give that to us. If anyone has body camera video, please give that to us. They say the Trump administration, again, roadblock after roadblock. Here is what the sheriff today says they do know.
There's no dispute that he was taken out of his house, forcibly taken out of his home, and driven around. And you can ask yourself, as you look at those pictures, is that good law enforcement to take an American citizen out of their home and drive them around aimlessly trying to determine what they can tell them?
Now, it's important to note at the time, DHS said they were looking for 2 sex offenders who lived at that address and that Chong Lee Scott Tao refused to show ID or be fingerprinted, which the family disputes and has disputed ever since. This is more of what DHS said today, Hallie. If we can pull up that agency statement, they went on to say DHS law enforcement officers were executing a warrant, which, again, that was a question that we heard from local authorities today. And they said through surveillance and intelligence, they concluded that sexual predator targets had ties to the property, which, again, the family says is not true. So basically, they go on to say that they stand by their story, that he refused to be ID'd, he refused to be fingerprinted. So they took him outside in his shorts, drove him around. The family basically putting out their own statement today, Hallie, I'll just sum it up, saying that they're grateful that this is being treated as unlawful. They have faith in the justice system, and they want to seek justice for Scott. You can see it there because they've maintained this entire time that he was a U.S. citizen who was doing nothing wrong. Hallie?
Maggie Vespa live for us on all of those developments. Maggie, we're glad you're staying on top of this story. Thank you. Also tonight, what appears to be an escalation in attacks against one of the biggest names in tech. We're talking about Sam Altman, the OpenAI CEO, with the FBI today seeming to raid the Texas home of the person who allegedly threw a Molotov cocktail at his house. Look at some of the new pictures coming into us. This is the 20-year-old suspect apparently caught on surveillance camera, according to prosecutors. So look, this is basically, look, watch. That's the suspect circled, right? That's him throwing the Molotov cocktail at the front gate of Altman's house. Prosecutors say he then went to OpenAI's headquarters and wanted to set the building on fire. Officials later recovered a document the suspect allegedly wrote about being anti-AI. This is coming after what we've learned now about a second and what appears to be separate attack outside Altman's house, a possible shooting. So no Molotov cocktail involved in that one. But Altman addressed the Friday attack in a blog post. He shared this picture of his family. We'll show you here to, in his words, dissuade the next person from throwing a Molotov cocktail, no matter what they think about me. All of it very concerning to Altman and his family. Let me bring in Dana Griffin, who's following the story for us. So you've got the Molotov cocktail thing. You've got this potential shooting. You've got the response now from Altman and OpenAI. What else do we know?
Yeah, so let's start with that San Francisco shooting. So on Sunday, investigators say that they arrested 2 people, a 25-year-old woman, a 23-year-old man, and they say that there appears to be a shot fired outside of OpenAI CEO Sam Altman's home. So the 25-year-old has been identified as Amanda Tom, her passenger, 23-year-old Muhammad Tariq Hussein. They were arrested not far from this home and booked into jail on suspicion of negligent discharge of a gun. Now, this fires that firebomb attack that you were showing us photos of, and this is is in relation to 20-year-old Daniel Moreno Gama. He was arrested after allegedly throwing that Molotov cocktail and then driving over to the OpenAI headquarters, where he took that chair and tried to break in. According to investigators, they say they recovered an incendiary device, a jug of kerosene, a blue lighter, and that 3-page document authored by the suspect titled "Your Last Warning." And then he also goes on, and there's a second part of that document. Its title is "Some More Words on the Matter of Our Impending Extinction." In part, Moreno discussed the purported risk AI poses to humanity. The FBI also conducted a raid at his home. As you mentioned, a press conference is scheduled in about 30 minutes where we hope to learn more. Hallie?
Dana Griffin, we'll be checking back with you in just about a half an hour or so if we do get any other info. Appreciate that. Coming up, the new fight between man and machine. How robots are trying to beat humans in a half marathon. Plus, pretty scary scene over in Iceland. What we know about why this plane, look at that big plane, was flying so low over homes nearby. That's next. We're learning today the stepbrother of an 18-year-old found dead during a family cruise vacation is now being charged with assaulting and killing her. You may remember this story. Anna Kepner, who you see here. She was found dead in early November. A medical examiner found she'd been strangled to death. Her 16-year-old stepbrother is now being prosecuted. By the way, being prosecuted as an adult. He's facing murder and sex abuse charges. Prosecutors say Kepner's murder was premeditated. NBC News has reached out to his attorneys for comment, although we haven't heard back. I want to bring in George Solis, who is following this story for us, and it is a difficult update to a story that we covered initially when it happened in November. What else do we know from this indictment?
Yeah, Hallie, we're starting to see a little bit more of how this investigation and how the case really unfolded. In the court documents obtained by NBC News, the stepbrother is only identified as TH, but it basically appears that they had this case back in February and it was sealed. And then up until about last week, this was basically moved for adult prosecution. So obviously it's going to move a little bit differently and a little bit quicker. But what we're learning here, based on what federal prosecutors are alleging, he's now facing charges of murder and aggravated sexual assault in the killing of his stepsister. And as you mentioned, you recall that it all takes place when the family is on board this Carnival cruise ship. Their investigators found her body essentially underneath a bed there. And even in an unrelated court case, Hallie, there was mention that TH was possibly a suspect in this case. Thus began a whole chain of events and a much more thorough investigation, which of course now ultimately leads us to this day where, again, we have these charges, these sex abuse and murder charges. At that time, it was known that he would be remanded into the custody of a guardian, not his parents. And as you mentioned, we have reached out multiple times to the family for comment and all of this. And so far, again, no comment from TH's family. However, we did hear from the family of Anna Kepner telling us that he needs to be arrested at this time. He is now an adult and he needs to be arrested. That is what the family stands. Justice needs to be served. But again, now the timeline here kind of is expedited. Whether or not he has to be remanded into federal custody or whether he remains with a guardian, Hallie, is what remains to be seen.
George Solis. George, thank you very much. We've got to get to some breaking news now coming into us here in Washington. We told you at the top of the show about Congressman Eric Swalwell under deep and intense pressure to step down after sexual misconduct allegations against him. He is now, in a statement that was posted literally in maybe the last 90 seconds, as we're getting our Hill team to a camera here, saying he is now apparently going to resign from Congress. I want to read you this statement here coming in from Eric Swalwell, again, Democrat from California. He had already dropped out of the governor's race in that state, and now apparently stepping down from his seat. He says he plans to resign his seat in Congress. I think our team has turned this around. We'll be able to show you some of what he said. And in part of this statement, 3 paragraphs just about, he says, I must take responsibility and ownerships for the mistakes I did make. He says he is aware of those efforts to bring an immediate expulsion vote against him and other members. Now, we talked about this earlier in the show. That is an effort that some, even in his own party, had been promoting. Swalwell says that expelling anyone in Congress without due process within days of an allegation being made is wrong, but he says it is also wrong for my constituents to have me distracted from my duties. Therefore, he says, I plan to resign my seat in Congress. He goes on to say that he's going to work with his staff to serve the needs of the people of the 14th Congressional District. He also apologizes at the top of the statement to what he calls mistakes in judgment and says, as he had said earlier, you see the statement here, that he will fight the serious and false allegations against him. This is the statement here. He says he will take responsibility and ownerships for the mistakes that he did make. I'm going to ask our team. I know that both Ryan Nobles and Mel Zanona were scrambling back over on Capitol Hill. I don't know if we have either one of them with us now. Not yet. We're going to come back to this story as soon as we get them. But keep in mind that this had come now after building pressure from, again, not just Republicans, but Democrats as well. The House Ethics Committee had opened an investigation and we're planning to pursue an investigation into these allegations against Swalwell as well. This is something that we have seen just recently on the Republican side of the aisle as it related to Congressman Tony Gonzalez and the sexual misconduct allegation against him as well, including one that ended with a staffer dying by suicide. Same staffer that made the allegation. We obviously don't know of any causal connection. But as far as Congressman Swalwell here, you can see he is stepping down from Congress. So a significant move from somebody who had been one of the more prominent voices, obviously, in the state of California, had thrown his hat in the ring in that contested governor's race there, somebody who has made frequent appearances, of course, as it relates to, media appearances, talking about Democratic priorities and policies, too. Mel Zanona has made her way now to the camera there on the Hill. It's a Monday at 5:30 p.m. The House is just coming back from a 2-week recess, Mel, and now you have this significant news. Mel Zanona, I think we can hear if you have us about Congressman Swalwell. Do we have you?
Yeah, can you hear me, Hallie?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Hey, I am on Capitol Hill right now. We just got this news in, obviously, from the congressman that he is resigning. It comes after these allegations that were made, these sexual assault allegations that were made by multiple women to both the San Francisco Chronicle and to CNN. After that came out, he did spend the weekend and then decided yesterday to drop his campaign for governor. But there was still this big question of whether he was going to remain a member of Congress. And he was facing increasing calls, not just from Republicans, but also from Democrats to resign his seat, or else they said they were going to vote to expel him. We were expecting an expulsion resolution to potentially come up as early as this week. That is a really high bar. It's a 2/3 majority in order to succeed. But the type of members that were calling on him to resign were quite notable. It was members of his own California delegation. And then most recently, Senator Ruben Gallego. He's from Arizona, but he is one of the congressman's closest allies and best friends on Capitol Hill and just on a personal level. And he came out with a statement saying, this is not the person I thought he was. He deserves to resign. He deserves to be expelled. We also got news today that there was going to be a House Ethics Committee investigation. When you're no longer a member of Congress, though, Hallie, that investigation goes completely away. So that will no longer be something that is active on Capitol Hill. But he is still facing a potential criminal investigation in Manhattan because New York is where one of those alleged sexual assaults occurred. The Manhattan DA did announce it is investigating Eric Swalwell. So his legal trouble is not going away, but for now, no longer a member of Congress, no longer facing a House Ethics Committee investigation.
Mel, can I ask you a couple of clarification follow-up questions? We may not know the answer to some of this. Do we know, as far as I can see in this statement, he says that he plans to resign. Do we know when? Is that effective immediately? Do we know if there's a timeline on that? Any idea?
Yeah, that's something we're still trying to figure out ourselves. Okay. He would have to go to the floor and kind of like make a formal announcement. It does appear, though, in that statement, just sort of reading between the lines here, that he wants to make sure his staff is in an okay position before he resigns. Some of them had even put out a remarkable statement saying our continued presence working for him does not signal support. Some of these people are junior members, can't really afford to just leave the office without a paycheck. So I think that's something that's still being sorted out. But in terms of when this will impact the margins, it will have to be made as an official announcement on the House floor to actually hold.
And then at that point, again, I may be too in the weeds here, I assume special election in California to replace him?
Yeah, there will be a special election at some point. That, again, is also unclear. It would be up to the governor to determine that. There's a little less flexibility in California than some of these other states where members are also facing calls to be expelled, like Tony Gonzalez, for example, who admitted to having an affair with a staffer. And that's, Hallie, another question is, now that Eric Swalwell is resigning, will some of these other members still face the pressure to resign or be expelled? That's something else we're watching very closely this week.
Mel, we mentioned that members of the House are coming back now to Washington today after this 2-week recess, basically, where they've been back home in their districts. One of the things that we chatted about with our colleague Ryan Nobles at the top of the show is that we really haven't heard much from Swalwell beyond these statements and a couple of videos that he has posted online. Are there any plans for him, do we know, to speak? Would he take the floor? Does he have to take the floor to announce his resignation, or could he simply submit something to the powers that be on the House side?
He could just submit a letter. He does not have to appear himself. We are going to obviously be staking out his office very closely, trying to get him in person, but he does not actually have to physically show up to the Capitol. If he were to be expelled, of course, that would have been a different situation. If you remember George Santos, when he was expelled, it was quite a circus, and he made a big appearance off the floor, and there's a million cameras. I imagine, though, that Swalwell might want to keep a lower profile in this case, especially as he faces that criminal investigation in New York.
But critically, as you mentioned, that House ethics investigation will now essentially disintegrate, right, if he's no longer a member?
That is correct.
Okay. Mel Zanona, much more from you, I know, at the top of the hour as our team works to find out some of these answers. Mel, thank you so much for getting to a camera. We're going to stay on top of this story. Obviously, the resignation now, the planned resignation of Eric Swalwell, Democratic congressman from California, after these sexual misconduct allegations against him. We'll give you any updates as we get them. We've got a lot more headlines to get to tonight. We're going to sneak in a very quick break, but after that, other news of the day, gang. Britney Spears is back in rehab tonight. What we're learning about her decision to check herself in. Plus, the race to save a family trapped inside a burning house. We've got the rescue video next. We are learning more tonight about what led Britney Spears to voluntarily check herself into a treatment facility. Her rep is confirming that decision to NBC News. TMZ first up on this, saying that Britney checked into rehab for substance abuse. This is after she was arrested last month, remember, on suspicion of driving under the influence in L.A. She's got her first court date coming up next month. Spears has been in treatment facilities before during her nearly 14-year conservatorship. That ended, of course, back in 2021. And since then, some have raised concerns over what they saw as erratic behavior, like some of the videos she's put on Instagram where she's like dancing with knives. She's putting up captions about darkness and suffering in her life. Chloe Malas is joining us now. So should we read anything into the timing of this voluntary stay in rehab ahead of her court appearance?
Absolutely. She's due back in court on May 4th. And let's not forget that she was pulled over by the California Highway Patrol, Hallie, for speeding, erratic driving, suspicion of a DUI. She's not been formally charged, but this is very serious. And at this court appearance, whether or not she actually goes in person or not, we know her lawyers will be there. The judge is absolutely going to weigh the fact that she voluntarily checked herself into rehab. We've asked her representatives, where is she? They will not say, rightfully so. You know, Britney deserves to have her privacy. But many people have been worried about Britney. Those I've spoken to who were in the Free Britney movement when I was covering the conservatorship back in 2021. And her videos are erratic at times, but she's had a big year, Hallie. I mean, and last year, right, the best-selling memoir, it's being turned into a movie. She just recently sold her music catalog. She's reunited with her children, her sons, and that seems to be going really well. There's a lot of love and goodwill for Britney Spears. And I think that, you know, so many people ask me, because I've covered Britney for nearly 20 years, you know, how is she doing? I mean, I don't know Britney Spears personally, but what I can tell you is that she has a lot of really good people around her that do care about her. And hopefully she's going to get the help that she clearly really needs.
Chloe Malas, following that one for us on that Britney beat again tonight. Chloe, thank you very much. Got to take you now to this doorbell cam video. Have you seen it? It is pretty much everywhere now. This guy getting kind of aggressive as he's trying to break into a family's Northern California home with a mom and a kid inside. It is chilling. Look at this.
Open the door. This is my neighborhood. Open the door. No.
Where's your daughter, man? Where's your daughter, man?
What are you talking about?
Where's your daughter? Who's in there with you?
Bro.
Who's in there? He says. Police say we're looking at this man, Jason Nichols, as he threatened the family inside the house. At one point, he's screaming. You heard him asking for the homeowner's daughter. On the intercom, dad pops in. He wasn't home at the time, saying he should leave. Suspect then managed to get inside. The owner gets home. I mean, look at this. The owner gets home with a shovel at one point. Off camera, you see, here he is now. Off camera, police say they both hit each other over the head. Both are expected to be okay, but that suspect's been charged now with multiple felonies. I want to get to Aaron McLaughlin. It's super sort of scary to see this play out. Do we know if this was targeted, Aaron, like a targeted attack?
At this point, Hallie, we do not know if the suspect had any connection to the family. In that video, we heard him asking, "Where's your daughter?" It's unclear if he knew the homeowner's daughter. All we know is that there was a woman and child inside the residence at the time of this alleged attack. We also know from authorities and from that video that he also claimed to be Harry Dresden, a popular urban fantasy character from the show The Dresden Files. Unclear if he has any connection to that show. So it's clear from the video that you're seeing right there that he is extremely disturbed. At one point, when the homeowner eventually arrives back home and confronts him off camera, you can hear the homeowner ask him, "Are you a veteran?" And he says, yes. And it was after that that they apparently got into this physical altercation. Both were hit in the head. Unclear what sort of mental health issues could be at play here as well. We do know that he is expected in court today there in Southern California, charged with 4 felony counts, including threatening crime with intent to terrorize. Unclear if how he intends to plea, also unclear if he has legal representation at this time. According to authorities, he is being held on $35,000 bail, which he has not posted. Hallie.
Aaron McLaughlin, thank you very much for that. NBC News covers hundreds of other stories every day, and because it can be tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. Out of our Southern Bureau, look at this, the moment a Georgia mom drops her kids into the arms of police to save them from a fire. Look at this. Come on. Look at that. Scary stuff. Flames were shooting out of the building when officers got there. The 2 children were dropped down safely from a balcony on the 2nd floor. Crews then rescued the mom along with a couple other people, and thankfully, everyone is doing just fine. Out of our Northeast Bureau, a tractor trailer slamming into a building after veering off a highway in New Jersey. The truck driver ended up trapped under the roof that collapsed. Took like half an hour to get him out. Good news is he's expected to be okay. Somebody on the 2nd floor at the time of the crash was not hurt, so more good news too. Out of our Western Bureau, LA public schools might close tomorrow because of a strike. LAUSD leaders have gotten to tentative deals with 2 of 3 unions involved ahead of tonight's deadline. But there's no agreement yet for the union that reps bus drivers, teachers' aides, custodians, and cafeteria workers. No deal means all of the unions will be on picket lines, so we're watching this one to see what happens at the deadline. To tonight's Original Now with in-depth reporting on a topic we've been watching. And tonight we are moments away from this year's WNBA draft, where we'll see the league's newest rookies find out where they're headed this season. That starts in just a few weeks. But this year, it's about more than what's happening on the court, with this historic new contract for the players that get them more money than ever before. Here's Priscilla Thompson.
Hoop dreams set to soar tonight as the rising stars in women's basketball go pro.
That moment when you hear your name called, what do you think that's going to be like?
I mean, that's something I've been looking forward to for my entire life.
Including UCLA's Kiki Rice, fresh off the university's NCAA championship win, and the People's Princess, UConn's AZ Fudd.
I think excited sums it all up.
Both expected to be first-round picks in a class of ballers hitting the WNBA hardwood at a major moment in the league.
WNBA players who will soon be paid more than ever.
A transformational collective bargaining agreement inked just last month will see players share in WNBA revenue and salaries skyrocket. The WNBA says the league's average salary is expected to increase from $120,000 to more than $500,000. Its biggest stars can now also score their first multi-million-dollar deals, with ESPN reporting 7-figure contracts already for stars like Brittany Griner and more. Many who in the past played overseas during the offseason to supplement their income, some making more than quadruple their WNBA salaries.
This is a very big deal.
Terry Carmichael Jackson helped negotiate the new deal on behalf of the players.
This is a deal that finally positions WNBA players, professional women basketball players, for success.
This year's top draft pick.
We're going to see a #1 pick not at the $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 salary range, but at $500,000. Your reaction to that?
It's insane. It's an incredible time to be coming in the league, to be playing women's basketball, to be playing women's sports in general.
And it's not just the salaries. Housing, charter air travel, and minimum standards for practice facilities are now all guaranteed. Health and wellness also a priority, with requirements for more medical staff, mental health reimbursements, and pregnancy protections, including obtaining consent before trading a pregnant player.
You see all these new perks, these benefits, changes that are going to help change our lives as professional athletes. I can't believe I just said ours as a professional athlete. I think it's going to be incredible.
It comes as interest in women's sports has surged in recent years, especially basketball. This past year, the WNBA saw its highest viewership and attendance ever, thanks to fan favorites like Angel Reese, Paige Beckers, and Caitlin Clark. Some say the salary increases may not be sustainable. While revenue is rising, the league still brings in far less than the NBA. Still, players went hard in the paint, even donning "pay us what you owe us" practice tees to set the next generation up to take it to the hoop.
There's a sense of legacy that they're being handed, and to continue to fight for what is rightfully theirs and what they absolutely deserve.
I think it's extremely empowering, inspiring. I think there's still more growth to go.
Waiting for tonight to sink their shot at change.
Priscilla's joining us now. There's a lot packed into this deal, but this revenue sharing thing was like the biggest sticking point in getting this over the line, right? Like, how's that working?
Yeah, Hallie. So previously, the WNBA players only received less than 10% of the share of the league's revenue. And you compare that to all of the major men's pro leagues, the NBA, the NFL, NHL, all sharing about half of their revenue with their players. And so we saw the Women's Basketball Players Association this year really push for that 20% revenue share, and they got it. The WNBA commissioner calling it a defining moment for the league. And so that is certainly exciting news. But Hallie, I will tell you what I am most excited about is that the Houston Comets are returning to the city after nearly 2 decades away. And that is going to happen next year, and I cannot wait.
You got to check back in with us then, Priscilla. Let us know how Houston does. I appreciate you, Priscilla Thompson. Thank you very much. A lot more to get to here on the show, including coming up, the Department of Defense facing a deadline to release dozens of mysterious UFO videos. One lawmaker is telling our team it's a matter of national security. You know, Gotti Shorts is all over this one in just a sec. Right now, the countdown to a deadline for one demand for the DOD to hand over dozens of basically secret UFO videos. They call them UAP videos by tomorrow, which has reignited the debate over what's flying in our skies and what it means for our national security. Gotti Shorts has more in tonight's breakdown.
The defense secretary facing a deadline from a lawmaker tonight who is asking for the release of 46 videos of what the government calls unidentified aerial phenomena, or UFOs, by tomorrow.
So you have your standard understanding of what would be able to function in this time and space continuum. And then you have these things that are just kind of operating outside of that. And what they tend to call these things are interdimensional.
They are specific videos with titles like several UAP in vicinity of Columbus, Ohio airport, UFOs in formation over Persian Gulf, and Syrian UAP instant acceleration. All referenced in a letter from Republican Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna to Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Luna explaining her urgency, writing, "The potential national security threat they pose is troubling."
There are many people in government that we come across that will come up to us, some in various high-level positions, that have said, look, we've seen these things, or, you know, we definitely think they're real. We just don't want to be labeled as crazy.
The UFO phenomenon moving from the fringe.
This is just the beginning.
To the mainstream.
The technology that we faced was far superior than anything that we had, and there's nothing we can do about it. Nothing.
In large part after a bombshell 2017 New York Times report titled "Glowing Auras and Black Money, the Pentagon's Mysterious UFO Program," that detailed a secret $22 million UFO program in the Pentagon to investigate reports of unidentified flying objects. The Navy even releasing videos of aerial phenomena spotted during military training flights, including this one of an object that appears over the water. Another seen in a mission from the USS Nimitz of some kind of object that accelerates out of view. Experts, including career officers, testifying on Capitol Hill that they've seen even more baffling things they can't explain. And one former intelligence officer saying the U.S. was in possession of a craft and beings that were not human.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human. From Hollywood and beyond, the UFO storyline has moved from the big screen to real life.
We just had the craziest orb UFO experience.
Singer Casey Musgraves posting images of what she says were UFOs she recently spotted while on a flight from Texas to Tennessee. President Obama reigniting speculation himself with these comments on a recent podcast.
Are aliens real?
They're real, but I haven't seen them, and they're not being kept in, what is it?
Area 51.
Area 51.
But then he walked it back, writing on Instagram, "I saw no evidence during my presidency that extraterrestrials have made contact with us." President Trump saying Obama did a, quote, really bad thing disclosing this information and then ordering the release of the UAP files back in February. As for tomorrow's deadline, the Pentagon telling NBC News in a statement, as with all congressional correspondence, we will reply directly to the authors of the letter. Tonight, the big question remains. If the truth is out there, will they ever release it?
Gotti is joining us now. You're ready. You are ready to see some of these videos. I know that this has been, like, honestly, something you've been reporting on for, like, years.
Yeah. Years, and I'm ready to also be disappointed, Hallie, because as I've been reporting this for years, we have consistently been given these deadlines, these dates. There's going to be a hearing. There's this. The president has said release all the files, and here we are. We don't have much, but the thing that I'm very excited about is whether or not we're going to see some of the videos, because the titles are pretty wild. This is the letter that was sent out to the Department of Defense, Department of War. And Hallie, again, the thing that's been so frustrating is that we don't have good evidence, right? We have sensors, we have all these platforms, but we don't have good evidence. A lot of this is, even in the descriptions here, United States Air Force F-16C, call sign Air Sur 11 shoots down UAP over Lake Huron with AIM 9X, a Sidewinder. We know what that one is. That one is going to be, you remember that Chinese balloon spy stuff that was happening back in 2023 and how they shot something down? They labeled that a UAP. That one looks like it's going to be some sort of company that was monitoring weather. But then there are other ones in here, UAP, UAS, underwater stuff next to submarines. We'll see if we actually see some of that video, but it could be very interesting.
Could be indeed. Gotti Schwartz, thank you, pal. Appreciate you, Gotti. More of his reporting coming up, by the way, later on tonight. Stay tuned now. That's at 8 o'clock Eastern, so see you then for that. That's a wrap for this hour. We've got more coverage right here, picking up right now. Coming on the air tonight with breaking news. A Democratic congressman planning to resign after allegations of sexual misconduct. Why Eric Swalwell says he'll call it quits now under huge pressure from allies. What the process could look like to replace him and what it means for others on the House side. We're live here in Washington on Capitol Hill. We are also looking, of course, at multiple fights by President Trump, including one against the Pope. Why Pope Leo says he's not afraid of the Trump administration and how the president's explaining that AI picture appearing to show him as Jesus.
I did post it, and I thought it was me as a doctor.
Why the president apparently pulled down the post anyway. We'll get into that. Plus, on the war, he's trying to cut off Iranian ships near the Strait of Hormuz, even if it means higher prices at home. Day one of this blockade and the red lines of the ceasefire that's barely hanging on coming up. Then the deadline, just looking at the clock, maybe an hour from now for police in the Bahamas to either charge or release a man whose wife went missing after going overboard. What our team is just hearing from his attorney. Then the new raid at the home of a person accused of throwing a Molotov cocktail at Sam Altman's house. New details on that attack and a second one, a potential shooting, later in the show. Hey there, I'm Hallie, and tonight we are starting with that breaking news into us in maybe the last 30 minutes, not even. A California congressman facing multiple accusations of sexual misconduct says he will resign from his position. Eric Swalwell, Democrat, says in this new statement that, in his words, I am aware of efforts to bring an immediate expulsion vote against me and other members. He goes on to say that while he thinks that expelling anyone without due process within days of an allegation is wrong, He doesn't want to be distracted for his constituents. So he says, I plan to resign my seat. Congressman Swalwell did not specify exactly what the timeline is on that. Of course, we know that less than 24 hours ago, he dropped that push that he was in to try to become California's next governor after days of pressure from some of his closest allies and staffers. On Friday, the San Francisco Chronicle published an article detailing allegations from one of Swalwell's former staffers who told the outlet that Swalwell sexually assaulted her twice while she was too intoxicated to consent. NBC News has not verified the allegations, but confirmed her identity and that she worked for Swalwell from 2019 until 2021. CNN also reports 4 women made sexual misconduct allegations against Swalwell, including one whose story matched details from the Chronicle article. NBC News has not independently corroborated their stories. Swalwell repeatedly denied what he calls false accusations against him. I want to bring in Mel Zanona, who's live for us on Capitol Hill. We've sort of laid out how we got to this point here, Mel, but walk through what happens from here, because there's a question on the timeline for Swalwell's resignation. This obviously eliminates the House ethics investigation that was going to be conducted against him as well, right? Do we know if we're going to hear from Swalwell anytime soon?
Yeah, that is a great question. He's not required to formally submit his resignation on the House floor. He can do that through a letter. So it's unclear whether we're actually going to see him on Capitol Hill. Hallie, I wouldn't be surprised if he actually doesn't end up showing up here. But there are very valid questions about what happens here for the investigation, what happens here for the House margins and the math, and also what happens for some of these other members that had also been facing some misconduct allegations. And there had been this growing appetite to push all of them out of Congress, including Swalwell. But I'll start with what is going to happen for his seat. There will be a special election. It will be up to the governor of California to actually set the date for that. Unclear at this point when that will be. But for now, Republicans get a little breathing room because they just got a Republican member back from the Marjorie Taylor Greene seat. Now Swalwell is leaving, so this is going to have an immediate impact on the margins. And as far as the House Ethics Committee investigation, when you're no longer a member of Congress, that Ethics Committee investigation goes away. So that may have been a factor. We don't know, but it may have been a factor in his decision to leave Congress. He was also facing pressure from some of his own allies and friends in Congress, some members of the California delegation, Senator Ruben Gallego, one of his closest friends in Congress, and also just on a personal level. So all of that was likely a factor in his decision. But he is still facing a potential criminal investigation in New York, because that is where one of those sexual assault allegations allegedly took place. So the Manhattan DA is looking into that. He is still facing these potential legal battles. And then finally, the other question that we're asking up here is now what happens to some of these other members that had also been facing calls for expulsion, because this whole Swalwell episode really shined a light on the misconduct by members broadly in Congress. There's a Republican, Tony Gonzalez of Texas. He admitted to having an affair with a staffer who later died by suicide. Now, none of those members are facing sexual assault allegations. Obviously, that is incredibly serious. So it's in a little bit of a different category, but no less, it is still against the House rules to be sleeping with a staff member. So there had been calls to expel both Swalwell and Gonzalez, potentially in some dueling expulsion resolutions later this week. We'll see if those still come to the floor. At this point, we're hearing there still will. The question is whether there's enough appetite in the House. 2/3 majority is the bar, which is quite high, in order to actually expel him.
There's also, and just looking at the statement from Swalwell again, the one that came out, as you know, in just the last maybe 36 minutes or so, but he again says he apologizes for what he describes as mistakes in judgment, but also says that these allegations against him are serious and false and that he will fight them. We have not really heard about what that means, right? Any further detail about that from Swalwell, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. But I would note that there are a litany of allegations against him. There's the sexual assault allegations. That's what he's being investigated for by the Manhattan DA. Those are incredibly serious allegations. But there are other allegations that some of these women have made, including in the CNN story, that he was sending them inappropriate messages and pictures and just behavior that was really unbecoming of a member of Congress. I spoke to one of those women as well over the weekend. She went on the record with me saying that she first met Swalwell when she was 20 years old. He offered to help her with her career. They connected on Snapchat, and their conversations initially were quite normal, but then she said it started to become flirtatious. He talked about how attractive she was, said he wanted to kiss her, and then sent an unsolicited photo of his genitalia. So in his statement, kind of reading between the lines here, he does admit to some mistakes, with his wife. He said that too in the video that he posted on Friday evening, saying, I have made mistakes, but that's between me and my wife. I'm sorry to her. So perhaps there is a distinction he's trying to draw between the allegations of just inappropriate behavior for a member of Congress and a married man versus these sexual assault allegations. But no less, he is denying those sexual assault allegations and vowing to fight them in court.
Mel Zanona, thank you very much for that. We're going to keep an eye on any news from Washington. We're also watching all the news from overseas because right now that ceasefire with Iran seems to be hanging by a thread about 7 hours into the president's push to try to blockade Iranian ports at the Strait of Hormuz. The goal, max economic pressure, right? That's what seems to be the goal, to try to get Iran to back down, even if that raises prices in the U.S. And the president's laying out his red lines regarding where these talks go next.
Iran will not have a nuclear weapon. And we agreed to a lot of things, but they didn't agree to that. And I think they will agree to it. I'm almost sure of it. In fact, I am sure of it. If they don't agree, there's no deal. There'll never be a deal.
It's serious stuff from the president, delivered, well, rather incongruously at an appearance outside the Oval Office with this woman wearing the DoorDash grandma shirt, handing off some bags of McDonald's, with the president asking, for example, for her thoughts on trans people in sports. At one point, see here, pulling out cash to tip her. At another point, referencing this AI-generated and now deleted post that's gotten a lot of backlash that looks to be showing him as Christ healing a sick person.
I did post it, and I thought it was me as a doctor, and had to do with Red Cross as a Red Cross worker there, which we support.
So questions of whether the I'm not Jesus, I'm a doctor defense will hold with the backlash that he's gotten, including some who say it was frankly disgusting, at least one person. But the president, although he deleted that post, is standing by his 334-word attack against Pope Leo XIV, calling Leo, of course, first American to lead the church, weak on crime, weak on nukes. Guess who asked the Pope about it? Our own Claudio Lavanga, who was traveling with him on a trip to Africa. And the Pope says the president doesn't scare him. Watch this.
I have no fear of neither the Trump administration nor speaking out loudly about the message of the gospel. And that's what I believe. I am called to do what the church is called to do. We're not politicians. We're not looking to make foreign policy, as he calls it, with the same perspective that he might understand it. But I do believe that the message of the gospel, blessed are the peacemakers, is a message that the world needs to hear today.
All right, Pope Leo there with Claudia. We've got team coverage tonight, but I want to start with Julie Sirkin, who is live for us at the White House here. You know, it's interesting. Timing, hashtag timing. The Religious Liberty Committee for the president's team met just today. And now you got one member of that panel slamming the president for the comments about the Pope. The picture itself, as we showed, got a bunch of backlash. Why pick this fight with the Pope now?
Yeah, those are all really good questions. Some may say it was a 60-minute segment on CBS that showed American cardinals and kind of a rare statement, a rare moment, rebuking the president's actions in Iran, but also his immigration policies. And then, of course, you have Pope Leo's comments criticizing the war in Iran, calling it ungodly, unholy, and saying it was unjust, calling instead on peace. This is a position that prior popes also had. They want peace, not war. And that is exactly what that bishop you just referred to, who is a big Trump ally, his name is Robert Barron, he posted on X. That is maybe what prompted that question, if the president is going to apologize to the Pope. He said, quote, they don't contribute at all to a constructive conversation, of course, referring to the president's AI-generated post. It is the Pope's prerogative to articulate Catholic doctrine and the principles that govern the moral life. I think the president owes the Pope an apology. Well, the president was asked if he would apologize to Pope Leo. He just doubled down. He said Pope Leo is a liberal. He said he's against his policies in Iran. He doesn't understand, the president said, that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, but that prompted huge backlash, more so to the AI image than what the president said about the Pope, but just a stunning moment all around.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. Gabe Gutierrez, our colleague there who covers the White House, too, spoke with the Archbishop of Miami about whether he thinks that the president owes the Pope an apology. Let me play what Gabe and him have to say.
I don't think the president apologizes to anybody, but, you know, I'm sure that the Pope would probably be happy to hear his confession and give him absolution than hear an apology.
I got to tell you, Julie, just based on the public statements, it doesn't seem as though the White House is all that concerned about the president running the risk of alienating Catholics ahead of the midterms, but you tell me.
Yeah, it doesn't, especially because that post, as you mentioned, is still up. The one that was deleted was that AI-generated image. I can't remember in recent memory the president actually apologizing, so some may say the deletion of that post serves as an apology. But you're completely right. He's getting a ton of backlash, especially on Capitol Hill. Senators just got back like 45 minutes ago, and already we're hearing from Senator Tom Tillis, who is a Catholic, telling my colleague Ryan Nobles that he doesn't believe that a politician should be picking a fight with a pope. He said he should have had advisors warn him off that, even if the president believed that image showed him to be a doctor. Another Republican, John Curtis of Utah, a Mormon, calling it blasphemous. John Thune, who is an evangelical himself, the Republican leader in the Senate, saying that you really shouldn't put the church in the middle of this. But still, Catholics, most of them voted for the president in the 2024 election. I think that had something to do with the president taking that AI image down. He really hasn't gotten the same level of criticism, though, about his comments to the Pope, except for, of course, people in that world that serve with the Pope, the Cardinal, the Bishop that I just talked to you about, not so much members of his base. Hallie?
Julie Sirkin, thank you very much for all that. Appreciate it. There is Richard Engel, live for us in the region, an Iran connection here with the parliament speaker, shouting out what they call the Pope's fearless stand against what he calls war crimes by Israel and the U.S., saying that the Pope's leadership inspires millions. I mean, this is the president stepping into a global fight now with, of course, one of the most powerful people on the planet. And it's happening against the backdrop of war against Iran, peace talks that have fallen apart, a ceasefire hanging on by a thread, and a brand new blockade that we're 8 hours into of Iranian ships at the port. There's a lot happening.
And it's all interconnected, as you just suggested, Hallie. A lot of people around the world do not support this war and do not believe President Trump. I'm in Israel right now, in Tel Aviv. There is a lot of support for President Trump. There is support for him continuing the war in Iran. There are posters on the streets where you see President Trump, the words, President Trump, finish the job, emblazoned in enormous letters. But that's here. If you go around Europe, you talk to other people in Latin America, other countries in the Middle East, there is more sympathy for Iran in some cases than there is trust for President Trump. So Iran is trying to play on this, is trying to show that President Trump is not a serious leader. He's not a credible leader. He's not someone who should be taken seriously. And I think that also impacts their negotiations. President Trump said that Iran keeps refusing to give up a nuclear weapon. Iran has many times promised that it will never have a nuclear weapon. Iranian officials have told me they're open to having weapons inspectors enter the country to visit the facility, that they are willing to get rid of, to remove from the country their stockpiles of more highly enriched uranium. A lot of this conflict right now, a lot of the justification that President Trump is using to keep this war going, particularly about Iran's capacity to develop a nuclear weapon, that it was going to have one in weeks and use it, just simply isn't borne out by fact. And I think that is being reflected in this negotiations, and we're all watching it happen. But for Iran, as it considers going into a new round of peace talks and a new round of ceasefire talks, they are trying to tell the world and tell their American negotiators that President Trump just isn't someone who should be taken seriously or believed.
Richard Engel, live for us there in Tel Aviv. Richard, we're glad to have you. Thank you for all that. Let me bring it back to the United States now, where Allie Canal is watching the markets. What's interesting, green, 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 if we can bring up the big board here, and the S&P actually erased all of its losses that it had during the war.
Yeah, erasing all those losses tied to the Iran war. It's actually positive now for the year. And this comes despite the fact that oil prices remain high, hovering around $100 a barrel. That obviously has a trickle-through effect when we look at prices at the pump, still above that psychological $4 a gallon level. That's a key level when we think about affordability. Pre-war, gas prices were actually trading below $3 a gallon nationally. And what's interesting is that if you look at oil production that was produced in the month of March across those Gulf countries. You're seeing that on your screen. That was down more than 25% last month. Production in some countries falling even more, with Iraq down over 60%, Kuwait down more than 50%. So as we continue to see this play out in the Strait, this blockade on Iranian ports in the Strait of Hormuz, that's only going to continue to push oil prices higher. And that doesn't just affect gas prices, also diesel prices, which means your travel costs are going to be higher. We've already seen those fees rise when we look at baggage, and then your food as well. Farmers hit by this Strait of Hormuz closure. So just a lot of ripple effects here that we're tracking, but stocks, they seem to be okay with it, at least for now.
Hallie Canal, thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. Got to get to some breaking news now as we've been on the air. We're learning that the man accused of throwing a Molotov cocktail at the home of one of the biggest names in tech, the head of OpenAI, is now being charged with attempted murder, among other charges. We've got some new surveillance pictures now of this 20-year-old suspect at Sam Altman's front gate. So look at this. You can see what's happening here. Prosecutors say he went to, after this, you see him, look, there's the suspect. Circled there is what appears to be that Molotov cocktail. Afterwards, prosecutors say he went to the headquarters of OpenAI with the intention of setting the building on fire. You see raising a chair, slamming it through the gate there. There's a news conference that wrapped up, I want to say, in the last not even 20 minutes here. Let me bring in Dana Griffin, who is live for us in the West with more on this. What do we hear now? What do we know about what these charges involve, where this goes, et cetera?
Yeah, so Hallie, we got a little bit more details about what happened that morning, Friday, 4:12 a.m. They say the suspect, Daniel Marino Gamma, showed up at Altman's San Francisco home, threw that Molotov cocktail, and it hit the gate. And luckily, firefighters were there. There was a security guard there that helped to put out this fire before anyone could be hurt. State charges so far: attempted murder for Sam Altman. There's an enhancement there, use of a deadly weapon. They also have another attempted murder charge for the security guard that was at the home, and attempted arson. They're also charging him for the behavior at the OpenAI headquarters, where he left Altman's home, drove there. Investigators say that he threatened to burn down the building, and they are also charging him with attempted criminal threats plus possession of a deadly weapon and attempted arson there. And Brooke Jenkins, the San Francisco DA, went on to say that we interpret this behavior as an attempt on Altman's life and extreme danger for those around him and work for his company. And they are asking for the temperature to be turned down for people who may have issues with AI, and their executives saying that this behavior is not going to be tolerated and that they will prosecute to the fullest extent of the law. Hallie?
Do we know anything else, Dan, about that second, a separate thing, the possible shooting? Do we know anything more on that or no?
Yeah, we do. So this was the latest thing that happened Sunday morning at 3 o'clock in the morning. So this vehicle drove by Altman's home, the same property where this Molotov cocktail was thrown just days earlier. The vehicle drove by. There was a shot fired. Investigators arrested 25-year-old Amanda Tom and her passenger, 23-year-old Mohammed Tariq Hussein. They recovered 3 guns after they arrested these people. And right now they say they are charged with negligent discharge of a gun. There is no evidence that both of these cases are linked, but obviously very concerning that you've had 2 attempts that could have been deadly at the home of the OpenAI CEO. Hallie?
Dana Griffin, thank you very much for all the developments on that one coming in just the last little bit. Appreciate that. Got to take you to another potential development in the next hour in the Bahamas. That's because there is a deadline, literally an hour from now, 7:20 Eastern, to either charge the husband of that American mom who went missing in the Bahamas or to let him walk free. Now, there is a kind of third option, too, according to Brian Hooker's attorney. Police could release Hooker tonight, but then rearrest him almost immediately. Lynette Hooker, his wife, has been missing for more than a week now. Her husband says she fell off a dinghy, a little boat that the couple had been riding in earlier this month, and that he had to paddle back to a boatyard to call police because she fell overboard with the key to their other boat. Lynette Hooker's daughter has been skeptical of what her stepdad says happened. According to her, the couple had a history of not getting along, especially when they drank. Hooker says he is innocent. Jesse Kirsch is on the ground in the Bahamas. So here we are, Jesse. The clock is ticking down. Questions about where things stand with Brian Hooker, and questions, his wife is still missing. She has not been found here. Bring us the updates.
Yeah, and I've spoken yet again today with the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, the military here in this island nation. Their search ongoing. We've known for days now that it is what they're referring to as a recovery operation, which hints at some skepticism about the possibility of Lynette Hooker being found alive. It speaks to the sense that they think they are not looking for someone who is still alive anymore. Just the grim reality of the situation, because as you mentioned, Hallie, we're talking about someone who's been missing since before Easter Sunday, effectively. Brian Hooker, her husband's attorney, just got here to the police station. We checked in with her again, and she says no update yet. So we are still waiting to see if there will be any criminal charges filed against Brian Hooker. And as you mentioned, if there aren't any within the next hour, our expectation is that he will walk down the steps from this police station behind us. But the catch is he could be re-arrested, taken back into custody as authorities here continue with their investigation. This all comes as we reached out as well to the State Department back in the U.S. They said they are aware of reports of an American missing in the Bahamas, also aware of reports of an American being detained in the Bahamas, not getting into any specifics beyond that. And that is, of course, something that we typically see from them when we're dealing with cases overseas. So we continue to have a lack of clarity on where Lynette Hooker is. Her husband's future uncertain as well. And throughout all this, we've been for days trying to get a comment from police. And over the weekend and into now, still nothing from them, Hallie.
Jesse Kirsch live for us there in the Bahamas. Jesse, I know you're staying up live until we have some sort of resolution or know anything more about this deadline. So appreciate you being there, and we'll look for your updates. Back here in the U.S., we're learning a county in Minnesota is now investigating the arrest of an American man by the feds as a possible kidnapping. So here's the backstory here with all of it caught on video back in January. This was the height of the immigration crackdown for the Trump administration. Here's what you're looking at. Officers got into the door of Chong Lee Scott Tao's door, bring him out. You see him there. He's in it looked like shorts and he had a blanket. Here he is. It's obviously January. It's very cold in Minnesota and St. Paul. They bring him out. But at that point, Tao was released after a few hours once he says officers realized he was an American citizen and had no criminal record. Watch.
Suddenly there's guns pointed at us. I thought, whoa. and then they go, you come out here.
Officials say they're now looking for information from DHS, but they are treating this like a potential case of kidnapping, of burglary, of false imprisonment. DHS, in response to our request for comment, says ICE does not kidnap people. They call this nothing but a political stunt to demonize law enforcement, who they say are facing an increase in assaults against them as they arrest the worst of the worst. I want to bring in Maggie Vespa, who's joining us now. I think it is fair to call this an escalation now between the local officials and the feds in this state when it comes to this immigration crackdown.
Yeah, Hallie, for sure. We haven't seen anything like this. And for people at home sitting there thinking, well, what does this mean? Well, effectively, it means just what it sounds like, that basically this county attorney and county sheriff, and this is Ramsey County where St. Paul is, want to charge those officers who you see in that video with any number of felonies, including but not limited to kidnapping, burglary, and unlawful detainment for that arrest that we all saw play out in that video. And keep in mind, you talk about the timing, that was less than 2 weeks after the fatal shooting of Renee Good. So tensions were really peaking in Minneapolis at that point. But here's the problem, say the county attorney and the sheriff. They don't know the names of those officers. They don't have badge numbers for these guys or specifically what agencies they were working for. One of them had ERO on his vest, which is Emergency Removal Operations. That's a division of ICE. But they say the Trump administration is refusing to turn over that information, as well as they said, we believe there was no warrant, but if you thought there was or if you had one at the time, please give that to us. If anyone has body camera video, please give that to us. They say the Trump administration, again, roadblock after roadblock. Here is what the sheriff today says they do know.
There's no dispute that he was taken out of his house, forcibly taken out of his home, and driven around. And you can ask yourself, as you look at those pictures, is that good law enforcement to take an American citizen out of their home and drive them around aimlessly trying to determine what they can tell them?
Now, it's important to note at the time, DHS said they were looking for 2 sex offenders who lived at that address and that Chong Lee Scott Tao refused to show ID or be fingerprinted, which the family disputes and has disputed ever since. This is more of what DHS said today, Hallie. If we can pull up that agency statement, they went on to say DHS law enforcement officers were executing a warrant, which, again, that was a question that we heard from local authorities today. And they said through surveillance and intelligence, they concluded that sexual predator targets had ties to the property, which, again, the family says is not true. So basically, they go on to say that they stand by their story, that he refused to be ID'd, he refused to be fingerprinted, so they took him outside in his shorts, drove him around. The family basically putting out their own statement today. Hallie, I'll just sum it up, saying that they're grateful that this is being treated as unlawful. They have faith in the justice system, and they want to seek justice for Scott. You can see it there because they've maintained this entire time that he was a U.S. citizen who was doing nothing wrong. Hallie.
Maggie Vespa live for us on all of those developments. Maggie, we're glad you're staying on top of this story. Thank you. Much more to come tonight, including new details on the death of a teenage girl, an 18-year-old on a cruise ship, who prosecutors say they're now charging with her murder. Next. We are learning today the stepbrother of an 18-year-old found dead during a family vacation on a cruise ship is now being charged with assaulting and killing her. You may remember Anna Kepner. You see her here. She was found dead in early November on this family vacation. A medical examiner found she'd been strangled to death. Now, her 16-year-old stepbrother is being prosecuted as an adult, facing murder and sex abuse charges. Prosecutors say Kepner's murder was premeditated. NBC News has reached out to the stepbrother's attorneys for comment, but we haven't heard back. George Solis is following this story for us. It is a difficult update to a story that we covered initially when it happened in November. What else do we know from this indictment?
Yeah, Hallie, we're starting to see a little bit more of how this investigation and how the case really unfolded. In the court documents obtained by NBC News, the stepbrothers only identified as TH, but it basically appears that they had this case back in February and it was sealed, and then up until about last week, this was basically moved for adult prosecution. So obviously it's going to move a little bit differently and a little bit quicker. But what we're learning here, based on what federal prosecutors are alleging, he's now facing charges of murder and aggravated sexual assault in the killing of his stepsister. And as you mentioned, you recall that it all takes place when the family is on board this Carnival cruise ship. Their investigators found her body essentially underneath a bed there. And even in an unrelated court case, Hallie, there was mention that TH was possibly a suspect in this case. Thus began a whole chain of events and a much more thorough investigation, which of course now ultimately leads us to this day where, again, we have these charges, these sex abuse and murder charges. At that time, it was known that he would be remanded into the custody of a guardian, not his parents. And as you mentioned, we have reached out multiple times to the family for comment and all of this. And so far, again, no comment from TH's family. However, we did hear from the family of Anna Kepner telling us that he needs to be arrested at this time. He is now an adult and he needs to be arrested. That is what the family stands. Justice needs to be served. But again, now the timeline here kind of is expedited. Whether or not he has to be remanded into federal custody or whether he remains with a guardian, Hallie, is what remains to be seen.
George Solis. George, thank you very much. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, a federal judge throwing out President Trump's $10 billion lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal. This is because of that controversial birthday card he allegedly sent Jeffrey Epstein. Birthday note. The president has repeatedly denied having anything to do with that card. The judge ruled the president's accusations against the Journal don't prove actual malice. The president's legal team says he will follow the ruling and continue, in quoting here, continue to hold accountable those who traffic in fake news. Dow Jones, the parent company of the Wall Street Journal, tells NBC, we stand behind the reliability, rigor, and accuracy of the Journal's reporting. Number 2, a victory for LGBTQ plus rights activists in New York City. The pride flag can fly at the Stonewall National Monument. The Trump administration had those flags removed back in February as part of a national crackdown on diversity initiatives. There was a lawsuit. It was settled. The flag's going to be flying again this week. Number 3, check this out. A plane coming in super low over a town in Iceland. We still don't know why, but Iceland Air says they had no knowledge of this maneuver. They didn't authorize this. It's now under investigation, but pretty dramatic how low it is over those rooftops. Number 4, hundreds of Hollywood's biggest stars protesting the planned Paramount Skydance merger with Warner Brothers Discovery. Ben Stiller, Bryan Cranston, Jane Fonda signing an open letter in which this group claims that the merger will mean fewer jobs, higher costs, and fewer options for audiences. Paramount Skydance responding, saying they hear and understand the concerns. They say they want to make sure creators have more avenues for their work, not fewer. Number 5, the world's oldest gorilla in captivity is celebrating her 69th birthday today, Fatu. These are her birthday gifts from the Berlin Zoo. No cake. It's not very good for her health, apparently, but still, happy birthday. Also tonight, we are gearing up for this pretty high-profile competition between humans and humanoids, a.k.a. between people and robots. with these machines hitting the streets of Beijing for a half marathon, some clearly outpacing others in these practice rounds. But it's just the latest example of the bigger race between the U.S. and China to develop these androids. Here's Kathy Park.
Robots powering on and hitting the pavement, training for Beijing's second ever humanoid half marathon this weekend. You see some here zooming through the track with ease, while others seem to be having a more difficult time at the starting line. A bit of deja vu from last year's race, where humans took the glory in the race of man versus machines, besting the droids by more than an hour and a half. A marketing manager with a Chinese robot maker says this year's race will reflect an overall improvement across the entire industry. Whether the androids will emerge victorious over humans this year, to be determined. But what is known, the race to develop humanoid robots keeps going on and off the track. The main competitors, the U.S. and China. From kung fu bots doing an impressive choreographed routine for the Chinese New Year, to robots starting to work in factory roles right here at home, as we covered last week. The big question is, how much are these robots doing it themselves versus being controlled or pre-programmed by human brains? For the big race, the robots are split into two groups, autonomous and remote controlled.
Remote control is easier, knows how to run, but the guidance for where it's running and avoiding anybody is really some person on the sideline.
The higher tech autonomous navigation teams will make up nearly 40% of the more than 100 participants. It all paves the way for a lot more of these metallic counterparts. A Morgan Stanley report predicts China will have over 300 million humanoid robots by 2050, with another 70 million in the United States.
The leaps and bounds that these technologies are making every 3 to 6 months is incredible.
So while there's been some hiccups in development, this year's tournament could showcase a big leap. Kathy Park, NBC News.
Much more to get to here on the show, including Britney's back in rehab tonight. What we're learning about her decision to check herself in next. We are learning more tonight about what led Britney Spears to voluntarily check herself into a treatment facility. Her rep is confirming that decision to NBC News. TMZ, first up on this, saying that Britney checked into rehab for substance abuse. This is after she was arrested last month, remember, on suspicion of driving under the influence in L.A. She's got her first court date coming up next month. Spears has been in treatment facilities before during her nearly 14-year conservatorship. That ended, of course, back in 2021. And since then, some have raised concerns over what they saw as erratic behavior, like some of the videos she's put on Instagram where she's like dancing with knives. She's putting up captions about darkness and suffering in her life. Chloe Malas is joining us now. So should we read anything into the timing of this voluntary stay in rehab ahead of her court appearance?
Absolutely. She's due back in court on May 4th. And let's not forget that she was pulled over by the California Highway Patrol, Hallie, for speeding, erratic driving, suspicion of a DUI. She's not been formally charged, but this is very serious. And at this court appearance, whether or not she actually goes in person or not, we know her lawyers will be there. The judge is absolutely going to weigh the fact that she voluntarily checked herself into rehab. We've asked her representatives, where is she? They will not say, rightfully so. You know, Britney deserves to have her privacy. But many people have been worried about Britney. Those I've spoken to who were in the Free Britney movement when I was covering the conservatorship back in 2021. And her videos are erratic at times. But she's had a big year, Hallie. I mean, and last year, right, the best-selling memoir, it's being turned into a movie. She just recently sold her music catalog. She's reunited with her children, her sons, and that seems to be going really well. There's a lot of love and goodwill for Britney Spears. And I think that, you know, so many people ask me, because I've covered Britney for nearly 20 years, you know, how is she doing? I mean, I don't know Britney Spears personally, but what I can tell you is that she has a lot of really good people around her that do care about her. And hopefully she's going to get the help that she clearly really needs.
Chloe Malas, following that one for us on that Britney beat again tonight. Chloe, thank you very much. Got to take you now to this doorbell cam video. Have you seen it? It is pretty much everywhere now. This guy getting kind of aggressive as he's trying to break into a family's Northern California home with a mom and a kid inside. It is chilling. Look at this.
Open the door. This is my neighborhood. Open the door. No.
Where's your daughter, man? Where's your daughter, man?
What are you talking about?
Where's your daughter? Who's in there with you?
Bro.
Who's in there? He says. Police say we're looking at this man, Jason Nichols, as he threatened the family inside the house. At one point, he's screaming. You heard him asking for the homeowner's daughter. On the intercom, Dad pops in. He wasn't home at the time, saying he should leave. Suspect then managed to get inside. The owner gets home. I mean, look at this. The owner gets home with a shovel at one point. Off camera, you see, here he is now. Off camera, police say they both hit each other over the head. Both are expected to be okay, but that suspect's been charged now with multiple felonies. I want to get to Aaron McLaughlin. Super sort of scary to see this play out. Do we know if this was targeted, Aaron, like a targeted attack?
At this point, Hallie, we do not know if the suspect had any connection to the family. In that video, we heard him asking, "Where's your daughter?" It's unclear if he knew the homeowner's daughter. All we know is that there was a woman and child inside the residence at the time of this alleged attack. We also know from authorities and from that video that he also claimed to be Harry Dresden, a popular urban fantasy character from the show The Dresden Files. Unclear if he has any connection to that show. So it's clear from the video that you're seeing right there that he is extremely disturbed. At one point, when the homeowner eventually arrives back home and confronts him off camera, you can hear the homeowner ask him, "Are you a veteran?" And he says, yes. And it was after that that they apparently got into this physical altercation. Both were hit in the head. Unclear what sort of mental health issues could be at play here as well. We do know that he is expected in court today there in Southern California, charged with 4 felony counts, including threatening crime with intent to terrorize. Unclear if how he intends to plea, also unclear if he has legal representation at this time. According to authorities, he is being held on $35,000 bail, which he has not posted. Hallie.
Aaron McLaughlin, thank you very much for that. NBC News covers hundreds of other stories every day, and because it can be tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. Out of our Southern Bureau, look at this, the moment a Georgia mom drops her kids into the arms of police to save them from a fire. Look at this. Come on. Look at that, scary stuff. Flames were shooting out of the building when officers got there. The 2 children were dropped down safely from a balcony on the 2nd floor. Crews then rescued the mom along with a couple other people, and thankfully, everyone is doing just fine. Out of our Northeast Bureau, a tractor trailer slamming into a building after veering off a highway in New Jersey. The truck driver ended up trapped under the roof that collapsed. Took like half an hour to get him out. Good news is he's expected to be okay. Somebody on the 2nd floor at the time of the crash was not hurt, so more good news too. Out of our Western Bureau, LA public schools might close tomorrow because of a strike. LAUSD leaders have gotten to tentative deals with 2 of 3 unions involved ahead of tonight's deadline. But there's no agreement yet for the union that reps bus drivers, teachers' aides, custodians, and cafeteria workers. No deal means all of the unions will be on picket lines, so we're watching this one to see what happens at the deadline. Still ahead, the WNBA draft beginning today, and for the women picked to change their lives on the court and at the bank. We'll explain how next. Got to get to some more breaking news here in Washington out of Capitol Hill. We talked earlier about Congressman Eric Swalwell saying he plans to resign from Congress. Now, on the other side of the aisle, Republican Congressman Tony Gonzalez from Texas says he will file his retirement from office tomorrow. So, again, questions on the timeline here, if that means he's leaving his seat immediately or what. But we have been reporting, of course, on sexual misconduct accusations against Gonzalez, who dropped his re-election push in the last couple of weeks. He allegedly sent inappropriate texts to multiple staffers. The House Ethics Committee is also investigating his relationship with a congressional aide who died by suicide last year. Let me bring in Ryan Nobles, who is joining us now. Not an hour ago, Ryan, we learned about, maybe an hour and a half, we learned about Eric Swalwell, Democrat, leaving Congress after sex misconduct allegations against him. And now Tony Gonzalez says he plans to leave the chamber. What else do we know about his situation and what this means for the House?
So the accusations against Tony Gonzalez are not exactly the same as the accusations against Eric Swalwell, but the process by which he is leaving Congress is very similar to Eric Swalwell's. There's an accusation against him. There's an ongoing ethics probe. There is the possibility of expulsion. And these are all things that Tony Gonzalez appears to not really have the stomach to go through and has just decided that now is the time to step down. Now, keep in mind that Gonzalez had already abandoned his reelection bid, but was still holding on to his seat and had said that he originally planned to stay in office until the end of his term. But that was really before the ethics investigation really started to heat up and before these allegations against Swalwell came out. And there became this groundswell of members, both Republicans and Democrats, calling on both he and Swalwell to be expelled. Now, if you remember, the accusations against Tony Gonzalez are that he had an extramarital affair with a member of his staff. That is something he has admitted to. That staff member then went on to take her own life. Now, there's no accusations against Gonzalez that his actions led to her taking her own life, but the mere fact that he was in an intimate relationship with a staffer is a clear violation of House rules. There were also examples of him trading sexually explicit text messages. And if you read into some of those messages, they do appear to be coercing her into that relationship, which is part of the reason that members of Congress are prohibited from this type of behavior because of that power imbalance. And so the calls for Gonzalez to leave office were growing by the minute. When the Swalwell accusations became front and center, it put a huge spotlight on this overall question of the sexual misconduct of members of Congress. And it seems as though the heat was just too much for Gonzalez at this point, and he's decided to resign. This, we should point out, Hallie, it is not by any stretch of the imagination the most important part of this story, given the fact that there are potential victims here. But there is now one Democrat and one Republican who plan to step down at roughly the same time. That means that very tight margin in the House of Representatives will go unchanged. This will not affect whether or not there are enough Republicans or enough Democrats to get a certain piece of legislation over the gate. So this is significant, and it's going to end that ethics probe into Gonzalez because he'll no longer be a member of Congress. But I should say, Hallie, I know we have to go. This is not the end of this. There are a number of other members who have similar accusations against them, and there's certainly a groundswell by members of the House to try and get to the root of this and get many of these people out of office.
Ryan Nobles, thank you very much for that. We've got much more news coming up right after the break. Right now, the countdown to a deadline for one demand for the DOD to hand over dozens of basically secret UFO videos. They call them UAP videos by tomorrow, which has reignited the debate over what's flying in our skies and what it means for our national security. Gotti Schwartz has more in tonight's breakdown.
The defense secretary facing a deadline from a lawmaker tonight who is asking for the release of 46 videos of what the government calls unidentified aerial phenomena, or UFOs, by tomorrow.
So you have your standard understanding of what would be able to function in this time and space continuum. And then you have these things that are just kind of operating outside of that. And what they tend to call these things are interdimensional.
They are specific videos with titles like several UAP in vicinity of Columbus, Ohio airport, UFOs in formation over Persian Gulf, and Syrian UAP instant acceleration. All referenced in a letter from Republican Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna to Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Luna explaining her urgency, writing, "The potential national security threat they pose is troubling."
There are many people in government that we come across that will come up to us, some in various high-level positions, that have said, look, we've seen these things, or, you know, we definitely think they're real. We just don't want to be labeled as crazy.
The UFO phenomenon moving from the fringe.
This is just the beginning.
To the mainstream.
The technology that we faced was far superior than anything that we had, and there's nothing we can do about it. Nothing.
In large part after a bombshell 2017 New York Times report titled Glowing Auras and Black Money, the Pentagon's mysterious UFO program that detailed a secret $22 million UFO program in the Pentagon to investigate reports of unidentified flying objects. The Navy even releasing videos of aerial phenomena spotted during military training flights, including this one of an object that appears over the water. Another seen in a mission from the USS Nimitz of some kind of object that accelerates out of view. Experts, including career officers, testifying on Capitol Hill that they've seen even more baffling things they can't explain. And one former intelligence officer saying the U.S. was in possession of a craft and beings that were not human.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human. From Hollywood and beyond, the UFO storyline has moved from the big screen to real life.
We just had the craziest orb UFO experience.
Singer Casey Musgraves posting images of what she says were UFOs she recently spotted while on a flight from Texas to Tennessee. President Obama reigniting speculation himself with these comments on a recent podcast.
Are aliens real?
They're real, but I haven't seen them, and they're not being kept in, what is it?
Area 51?
Area 51.
But then he walked it back, writing on Instagram, "I saw no evidence during my presidency that extraterrestrials have made contact with us." President Trump saying Obama did a, quote, really bad thing disclosing this information and then ordering the release of the UAP files back in February. As for tomorrow's deadline, the Pentagon telling NBC News in a statement, as with all congressional correspondence, we will reply directly to the authors of the letter. Tonight, the big question remains. If the truth is out there, will they ever release it?
Gotti is joining us now. You're ready. You are ready to see some of these videos. I know that this has been, like, honestly, something you've been reporting on for, like, years.
Yeah. Years, and I'm ready to also be disappointed, Hallie, because as I've been reporting this for years, we have consistently been given these deadlines, these dates. There's going to be a hearing. There's this. The president has said release all the files, and here we are. We don't have much, but the thing that I'm very excited about is whether or not we're going to see some of the videos, because the titles are pretty wild. This is the letter that was sent out to the Department of Defense, Department of War. And Hallie, again, the thing that's been so frustrating is that we don't have good evidence, right? We have sensors, we have all these platforms, but we don't have good evidence. A lot of this is, even in the descriptions here, United States Air Force, F-16C, call sign Air Sur 11 shoots down UAP over Lake Huron with AIM 9X, a Sidewinder. We know what that one is. That one is going to be, you remember that Chinese balloon spy stuff that was happening back in 2023 and how they shot something down? They labeled that a UAP. That one looks like it's going to be some sort of company that was monitoring weather. But then there are other ones in here, UAP, UAS, underwater stuff next to submarines. We'll see if we actually see some of that video, but it could be very interesting.
Could be indeed. Gotti Schwartz. Thank you, pal. Appreciate you, Gotti. More of his reporting coming up, by the way, later on tonight. Stay tuned now. That's at 8 o'clock Eastern. So see you then for that. That's a wrap for this hour. We've got more coverage right here, picking up right now.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.